Hey crew, and welcome back. Clayton here. So today I want to show you 3 different ways to make some doors that are super design friendly, so you can set all of your logic up front and not have to worry about it at design time. So I'm going to show you a physics-based door. From there I want to show you an automatic door and a standard interaction door. And the way these doors are going to be designed is you can change their opening direction with this simple arrow. So let's get started. Okay, for this project, I have opened the third-person template with the starter content. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to hit Control Space and open our content drawer. I'm going to create myself a folder called Blueprints. Inside of there, I'm going to go to Blueprint, go to Blueprint Interface. I'm going to call this BPI Interact. I'm going to open that up. For this function, we just need to call this interact, compile and save, and then we can close this file. Back in my content drawer in my blueprints folder, I'm going to right click, create a blueprint class of actor. I'm going to call this BP physicsdoor. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. I'm going to add 2 static mesh components. This first one I'm going to call frame. The second one I'm going to call door. And I'm not going to have them parented to one another. So I'm going to move that up here. For the frame, I'm going to go over to the right side, search door, and choose the SM door frame from the starter content. For the door, you guessed it, we're going to go in here and choose the SM door. So let's go ahead and line this door up in the middle. Find a value of 45 works well. So for us to build a physics door, we need to enable collision on this door. So I'm going to go on the right side and I'm going to double click the static mesh. I'm going to come up here to where it says collision. I'm going to click on add box simplified collision. So for this door, since we want it to swing, I'm going to come in. I'm going to make this box collision just a little bit smaller so it does not overlap the door. So I'm going to turn off my snapping. Bring this just so it covers most of the door, but leaves just a little room at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and save, close that. I'm going to compile and save. So now I'm going to come back up here to add. I'm going to add a physics constraint. I'm just going to leave it named physics constraint. I want to make sure it is not parented to anything else in here. I'm going to come over on the right side with the physics constraint highlighted. I'm going to scroll down until I find constraint. I'm going to open up component name 1. And in here, I'm going to type door. So this has to be the same capitalization as your door object. So whatever you name that, make sure you spell it the same in here. Then I'm going to scroll down further on the right side until you come to the angular limits section. So for swing motion 1, I want to make this limited. I'm going to make this 90 degrees. For swing motion 2, I want that locked. And for twist motion, I want that locked as well. So the door doesn't have any unnatural movement to it. So now I'm going to grab the physics constraint. I'm going to pull it off to the side over here so I can see it. So if I zoom in on this, you'll see this half a circle right here, and that's going to indicate the direction of the swing. So I'm going to use my standard rotation tool. I'm going to turn that 90 degrees this way. And I'm going to move it back so it's just kind of lined up at the base of our door. Right there should be good. So for right now, let's compile and save. Let's go back to our map and let's add this into our world and take a look. rotate that around. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And the door doesn't move. One other thing I forgot to check is on the door. Come down to physics and we click simulate physics. From here, if you want to set the linear dampening or angular dampening, you can do that. We'll play with that here in a moment. So I'm going to compile and save. There it moves, but you can see it kind of rocks off of its hinge here a little bit. So let's go back in, and I believe what's going on is our collisions are not set up correctly. So first I'm going to start with the frame. I'm going to scroll down until I find collision. Under collision presets, I'm going to change this to no collision for the frame. For the door, I'm going to come to collision. We're going to see that's already set as physics actor due to our checking simulate physics. So let's compile and save again. Again, try our door again. It's a little better, but now it doesn't close. Back in our BP physicsdoor script, let's click on physics constraint. Let's go down underneath of the angular limits to where it says angular motor. So for the angular drive mode, we want to switch this to twist and swing. And then for the drive, we want swing. And I'm going to leave this value at 50. Now let's go try our door again. Much better. As you can see, that works much better, but there's too much swing on the door. So let's go back and tweak that a little bit. So let's go back over and click on door. And earlier I mentioned the linear dampening. You can play with these values to get the door to act the way you want it to. I've found about 2.5 in that dampening works pretty well. So it just depends upon how much swing you want on your door and how fast you want it to come to rest again. So there you go. That is our physics door. Everything is configured right here in the viewport. No blueprints. Now with that door done, so when it's time to design your level, all you have to do is drag these doors out and place them in your world and not have to worry about any logic. So now let's make our slide door. So on this, I'm going to right click, new blueprint class, actor. I'm going to call this BP slide door. So for this door, I'm going to add a cube. If you have a different mesh you want to use, you can add that. So for me, let's take this door. I'm going to leave the exit 1 and make the wide about 2.5, and then I'm going to make it a little taller on the Z, about 1.5. I'm going to resist the urge to raise it or anything else. We'll worry about that at design time. I am going to come over here at F2 and call this door. I'm going to compile and save. I'm going to go over to my event graph. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these two nodes. We're not going to need them. I'm going to come up to class settings. I'm going to add in our BPI interact. If you've never worked with blueprint interfaces before, I do have another video that covers this topic that I will link for you on the screen and in the description. So we're on the left under variables. We're going to need a few different variables for this. First one, let's say, is door open. Question mark. We'll leave that as a Boolean. Compile and save. By default, I want this to be false. We're going to start with the door closed. I'm going to add another one here. I want to be able to set my door opening speed. So I'm going to call this door speed. I'm going to make that a float. Then I'm going to set one more, and I'm going to call this open distance. And I'm also going to leave that as a float. So I'm going to come back to event, begin play here in a minute. I'm going to double click on our event interact from our interface. So I'm going to drag out my door open, do a get, pull this up, add a branch. So to start, every time my character comes up to interact, I'm going to ask it, is the door open? So from here, we're going to need some custom events to call. I'm going to come down underneath, right click, and add custom event. I'm going to call this open door. Under that a little ways, I'm going to add another custom event. And you guessed it, I'm going to call this closed door. So on event interact, is the door open? If it is, we want to close it. So I'm going to call it closed door. And if it's not, then we want to open it. Straighten those up a little bit. So for our door open function, first thing we want to do is we're going to hold down Alt and drag out is door open. We're going to say yes and reset this variable right away. Then I want to come out. I'm going to create a timeline. Add timeline. We're going to call this move door. I'm going to double click the timeline to open it. I'm going to click on track and add a float track. I'm just going to call this amount. I'm going to change the length right here to about 2.5. Then on the graph, I'm going to add a key. For time, I'm going to say 0. For length, I'm going to also add 0. I'm going to add another key. And for time, I'm going to make this 2.5, same as the length of our timeline. And for value, I'm going to have 1. I'm going to hit both these buttons, put everything on the screen. This key is already selected. I'm going to control click this key, right click and switch to auto so it smooths out this timeline for us. I'm going to compile and save, and then I'm going to close the timeline. From the timeline, I want to pull this out and I want to add a lerp node. I'm going to move this connector down to alpha. So for our open distance variable that we made, I'm going to come over, I'm going to give it a default value of 100, so it's not sitting at 0. I'm going to pull this out here and add it to B on that node. Now here's the fun part of these doors. Let's come back over to viewport. Let's come up to add, and we're going to look for an arrow. Click on that and add it. I'm going to name it open direction. And what I'm going to do is pull this out so I can see it clearly on one side of the door. Just kind of leave it centered. It's not going to show in your game, so you really don't need to configure it any farther. Compile and save. I'm going to come back to the event graph. Now I'm going to grab the open door direction. From there, I want to get its relative rotation. Even spelled correctly. From that, we want to get the forward vector so we can understand which way it is facing. I'm going to pull that out and get a multiply node. Move this connection to the bottom. Add our lerp to the top so we can grab our incremental value in this direction that the arrow is facing. And then from there, I want to set relative location. I'm going to choose door, and it'll add this reference for me. Put the update node, straighten these up a little bit. So let's compile and save and test what we've done so far. So I'm going to go over to the right. I'm going to go into the starter content folder under architecture, and I'm going to grab the wall door, add it right here. And then from our blueprints folder, I'm going to grab BP slide door, and I'm going to pull that into the scene. I'm going to go ahead and rotate that 180 so I can see my arrow. Move this up. I'm just going to size this door so it fills in this opening. And that's the great thing about these doors, and another thing that makes them very designer friendly is you can rearrange them and size them as you're building out your level without worrying about changing the functionality too much. That looks a little thick, so I'm going to come over to scale. I'm going to make that 0.5. Okay, very good. Let's move that down just a little bit, and it'll be all right. So before we can test, there's a couple more things we need to configure. So let's go back over to BP slide door. Let's hit this icon next to door speed and open distance. That way these are instance editable. Let's come up to the top to event begin play. So I'm going to move this up a little bit so we have some space. So if you remember, we named our timeline move door. So I'm going to find a reference to move door, get move door. From there, I want to set play rate. This will allow you at design time to change the opening speed of the door. So I'm going to hook this up, and then I'm going to get our door speed variable. I'm going to pull this out and hook this up here. And that's it. There we go. So I'm going to give a default value of 1, compile and save. So if we go back to our map, click on the door, you will now see door speed and open distance. So depending upon how you want your door to operate, this arrow pointing this way means the door will open this way. If you want to, while the door's clicked, if you come over here under your details panel on the right side, if you click open direction, you can rotate this arrow, and that's the direction the door is going to open. So let's go set up our character interact code so we can open this door and test it. So in my content drawer, I'm going to go down to third person. I'm going to start by going to the input folder and then the actions. I'm going to right click, go to input, and input action. I'm going to call this IA for input action, interact. I'm going to open this up. By default, this should be on digital bool. That is basically your button press. There are other types of input you can get from here, but for us, we want the button press. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to go back up one directory to input, and I'm going to open this IMC default. I'm going to expand mappings. I'm going to hit this plus and add one more. I'm going to find our IA interact. Add that. I'm going to click on this keyboard, and for me, I'm going to use the E key. You can set up any key you want for this, or if you want to add multiple keys, you can do that. You just have to hit this plus right here and choose another key. So I'm going to remove that and just stick with the E key. I'll save this and close it. Now in our content drawer, I'm going to go to third person blueprints. I'm going to open our BP third person character. I come down here to the bottom. I'm going to look for the IA interact that we created. So there's several things you can do with this input system. For what we're wanting to do right now, we're going to pull from started because we just want to know when the button was pressed. So this would be key down. This would be key up, or the equivalent of that. Triggered is while the key is pressed. So depending upon the device you're using for input, you could get multiple triggers from this. So for an action such as opening a door, I do recommend that you use started. So I'm going to pull from there and do a line trace by channel. So now we need to figure out the start and end points. I'm going to go ahead and collapse this node. I'm going to reach up and grab our follow camera and get a reference to that. From there, I want to get world location. I'm going to add that to the start position. From the camera, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to get forward vector. Move our line trace over a little bit. From here, I want to add a multiply node. I'm going to right click the second pin. I'm going to change this to a float. And let's say 750. From there, I'm going to add this from the start position. Let's switch those around so they make a little more sense when we're looking at it. And I'm going to add that to the end location. So just for now, I'm going to go ahead and turn on for duration so we can see this firing, but it isn't on the screen for the entire time. So if we hit something, I'm going to break the results on this actor so we can see the struct. From there, the hit actor does implement interface, and this is where we're going to add our BPI interact that we made just a little bit ago, spelled correctly and all. And from there, I will add a branch. So when we send out our line trace, if we do hit something and it does implement our BP interact interface, we want to call interact. And you'll see message next to the interact function. And move this node up. And we want to pass in the hit actor. Go ahead and add that there so we can see our line, make that a little neater. All right, so let's compile and save that for a moment. So on our interact, from the follow camera, we'll get the location, start there. We'll get the forward vector and add 750 units from that, add it to the start position, and that'll be our end spot for our trace. From there, if we did hit something, if that other hit actor does implement our BP interact, we will call the interact function on it. So let's go ahead and go back to our map and test. So if I press E right here, we will see our line coming out. So I'm going to go up to the door. And there we go. The door opened. Looks like our open distance is a little far. So let's click on the door and let's move that to, say, 85. Hit play again. And there we go. Adjustable during design time. Nice and easy. So now, let's close the door. Let's go back to BP slide door. I'm going to come down here to our closed door. So just like open door, I want to bring out the variable is door open. I'm going to hold down Alt so I can set that value. And since we're closing the door, it is not open. And I'm going to take this pin, I'm going to pull it into reverse. And there you go. Closed door function is done. That easy. Let's compile and save and test that out. We can open our door. And then we can close our door. And if we want to, we can click on the door. And remember, we have to come in the details panel and click on the arrow. We can switch that direction over to the other side. Hit play. And there we go. Our door opens the other direction. That easy. So now let's set up an automatic door. Let's open the content drawer. Let's go back to our blueprint folder. I'm going to click on BP slide door. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate that. I'm going to name this BP_auto door. So these doors will be very similar with just a little bit of logic change to it. So let's go ahead and open up auto door. I'm going to go to the viewport, and just so we can tell the difference in these doors when we have them in our world, I'm going to come over to the door. I'm going to come over to the material. I'm going to hit the little folder search icon so we can find it here. So here you will find the default material that our cube is using. You can see I've already made a green material. All I did to do that is I hit Control D and I named it basic shape material. Let's make this one blue. I'll just go ahead and open that. Double click this parameter. Find a blue color that I like. Hit OK and save. Now this save does take a minute sometimes, but I can go ahead and close that. Come back to BP Auto Door. I can drag out that material and put it on the door, just so we can see the difference when we're testing. So I'm going to come back over to the event graph. We want to keep our set play rate so we can still alter the speed of the door. We're not going to need our event interact code anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Let's go ahead and comment this code. So I'm going to highlight all of that. I'm going to press C. I'm going to name this begin play. And we can set a color on that. I'm just going to make it a little darker. Say OK. And I'm going to say show bubble when zoomed. This way, when you zoom out, you can still see the label. We're going to reuse most of this code, so I'm going to leave this set for now. So on this door, we want this to be an automatic door. So I'm going to come over to viewport. I'm going to go up to add, and I'm going to look for a box collision. I'm going to put that in, and I'll just name it box collision. I'm going to go over on the right side. I'm going to up the line thickness to maybe 1.5, so it's a little more visible. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to make this a little bigger for right now. We can adjust this at design time, but I just want it to kind of stick out, kind of obvious from the door. So I think that's good enough for now. Compile and save with box collision highlighted. I'm going to come over on the right side. I'm going to scroll down. And I'm going to find on component begin overlap. Click that. So on this, we want to take the other actor. I'm going to pull out from there and I'm going to hit equals on my keyboard. And we want to know if this is equal to the player character. So from there, I'm going to say get player character. This way, if you have enemy AI or other things in your world, and if you don't want them to trigger the door, this will prevent that. So from there, I'll add a branch. So for this door, the other thing we might want to know is when the door is moving. So I'm going to come over to variables, say is door moving. Compile and save. By default, it's to be unchecked or false. So when the character overlaps our box, if it is the character, we'll then want to know, is the door moving? So we'll add a branch. And if it is not moving, say open door. Personal preference at this point, if you don't like the true false sort of split on this logic, remove this. What you can do is I will move this over, and from is door moving, you can do a not bool and plug that into your branch instead and reverse this logic. So if the door is not moving, then you can open the door. Otherwise, the way we had it before, if the door is moving, we would do nothing on true and activate open door on false. Either way, personal preference. So I'm going to go ahead and stack these nodes. I'm going to compile and save so we don't lose any of our work. So the first part of this logic would be the same, but what we want to do is grab these four and back them up. Since we're running these functions, then our door is moving. So I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to drag out is door moving. Set that to true. And I can copy and paste this node. Set that here, plug that into reverse. So this way, if your character runs in and out of the trigger box, this won't get called multiple times into this timeline because the is moving will be triggered. We will reset this when it's done moving. So we have our timeline moving the door. We have our configurable open distance. We have our configurable open arrow in the direction. So from there, once this is done, from the finish node, we want to get is door moving and hold down Alt, pull this out. I really wish these two nodes were reversed, so these execution pins didn't cross all the time, but personal preference. So from here, I'm going to change the variable is door moving to false because the door's done by now. I'm going to ask it is door open. Hold down B and get a branch. It's down just a little bit. If the door is open, I want to delay. And then what I want to do is I want to make this delay configurable. So I'm going to right click this. I'm going to promote the variable. And I'm going to call this door open delay. Compile and save. By default, I'm going to make that 2 seconds. And then after the delay, I want to close the door. So regardless of what's going on with the player or anything else, after 2 seconds, this door will close on its own. So let's compile and save. Go back to our map. So this time I'll go over on the left, go back into our starter content, architecture. I'll get another one of those walls. And I will go to our blueprint folder. I'll drag out the BP auto door. I will configure this right quick. Turn off my snapping. Once again, I'm going to make this about 0.5 on the thickness so it's inset in that wall. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to come over here on the right side, choose this box collider. I want to make that a lot bigger. So I'm going to move this out. So anytime my character enters this box, I want them to have a little bit of room away from the door. They don't have to be right up on the door. And make that a little bit wider. A little bit taller, doesn't have to be all the way up. Take a look at that. That looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to file, save all. And then I'm going to test the game. So start, we'll turn left. As we step into the box, the door opens. And then after 2 seconds, it closes. It seems pretty slow. So let's select that door. Let's come over. Let's make our door speed 2.5. Let's turn up the open distance to, say, 150. And then under details, choose our open direction arrow. Let's make our door open in this direction, just for fun. Test the game. And there we go. We have a configurable automatic door. Character triggered that again when I hit the box trigger. Maybe make that box trigger a little smaller. So I'm going to select the door, select box collision on the right side. Let's move that in a little bit. Maybe we're a little too far out. Personal preference on how much leeway you want to give your character. So there we go. Okay, crew, there we go. We have our automatic door. We have our physics door. And we have our sliding interact door. all configurable at runtime with speed, direction, movement distance, everything else. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you found the 3 different approaches to these doors helpful. If so, if you could like and subscribe the channel, it'll help me grow. If there's something particular you would like to see in these tutorials, please leave a comment down below and I can work on that for you. Until then, check out these other videos I'm going to link for you. Thanks again for stopping by and watching. I look forward to making games with you.